Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar for this evening. We're so glad you've joined us. It's a very important and very timely topic, as we all know. I'm John Dauphiné, CEO of the Foundation for Financial Planning, and I'm joined by my colleague Rachel Roth, who heads up our grants and programs team. And again, we're really pleased you could be with us this evening. I note that we are doing this initiative in partnership with the CFP Board. And we're doing it to assist advisors who want to help federal employees in these uncertain times. Many have very weighty and serious decisions to make, and they're looking to advisors for help. I want to thank CFP Board and especially Karen Schaeffer for the great collaboration that's gone into this initiative. So what are we doing together? Very briefly, we are doing some educational work to help both advisors and federal employees understand some of the decisions they have to make, the benefits that they're eligible for, and the like. So this is the first webinar we're doing. It is for advisors. You will receive, if you attend for at least an hour and 40 minutes, 2 CE credits if you're a CFP professional. We at FFP, we will do the reporting. So we will report your name to CFP Board as having attended. And then a special offering that we're doing, given the huge interest in this subject matter, is we are working with CFP Board to create a list of CFP professionals who are willing to help federal employees and their families on a pro bono basis or for a reduced fee, up to $250 per hour, but no more. And CFP Board is going to be compiling a list of CFP professionals who are willing to offer these services and help federal employees. We'll be sending out more about this tomorrow, including a sign-up sheet for the consent form that would get you listed as an advisor on CFP Board's website. And we really hope you'll consider doing this. We're trying to get a critical mass that can be there in these times for federal workers. The form will ask you to fill it out by Wednesday, March 25th at midnight. So there won't be too much time, but definitely you'll have a chance to look it over. And if you have questions about the form or being listed on CFP Board's website, we encourage you to reach out directly to them, our partners, and you can reach them at probono@cfpboard.org. I also want to make note that during Karen's presentation tonight, there will be 2 of Karen's colleagues answering questions. So if you have questions as we go, please put them in the Q&A tool and they will be answered by Karen's colleagues. Also, my colleague Rachel will be taking some of the questions and posing them to Karen live during the session. So we hope to get to as many as we can. As I mentioned, this initiative also includes a webinar for consumers, for federal workers and their families. That will be this time next Thursday from 7 to 9 Eastern, the same time as this one. And Karen will be leading that along with a benefit specialist. And they'll be really have a lot of terrific information, as you'll see tonight. But this will be geared at the federal workers and really help them to navigate uncertainty. We encourage you to share this webinar registration with family, contacts, friends who may have interest. And Rachel will put a link to that and share it so that you can promote it yourselves. Before we jump in, I just want to very briefly touch on the Foundation for Financial Planning for those of you who may not be familiar with us. And really, we are the nation's leading nonprofit, all about promoting pro bono financial planning for people in crisis or need. We all know that there are millions of Americans who live on the financial edge, who wouldn't even have $1,000 for an emergency expense, and we are here to try to bring them fiduciary expert advice from CFP professionals. We've been around for 30 years this year, and we were founded by financial advisors who, in their daily practices, were seeing only high net worth folks, and they wanted to lend their time and talent to families that otherwise couldn't afford great expert fiduciary advice. Over this time period, we've issued more than 10 million in grants, and we brought services to approaching 800,000 Americans with the help of the lifeblood of this movement, which is about 30,000 CFP professionals who have done this great volunteer work. Um, in very brief terms, we do three things. We fund, support, consult on, and grow pro bono programs across the country with our nonprofit partners. We also recruit and train CFP professionals to do this work. And so we have an online platform called probonoplannermatch.org, where any CFP professional can register and then browse opportunities across the country at our nonprofit partners to help their constituents. And then lastly, we lead a pro bono movement within this great profession. We have a lot of original research, we have a lot of partnerships, and we do a lot of public awareness to try to get more and more folks engaged. A couple of our training and resources, in addition to this webinar series, if you've never done pro bono but you're interested, we have a Pro Bono 101 training. It's free, it's online, you get a CE credit. I encourage you to check it out. We have a lot of tools for pro bono engagements, like sample letters of engagements. We also, as I mentioned, have our clearinghouse of opportunities across the country that may interest you on probonoplannermatch.org. And then finally, for eligible CFP professionals, we offer complimentary E&O liability insurance to anyone who signs up for an opportunity on our website. So I really do encourage you to check it out. In addition to Pro Bono Planner Match, we have a monthly e-newsletter. It's really easy to sign up for on our website. You can see the link there, ffpprobono.org, get updates. And then also, we are a 501c3 charity. We rely on donations from advisors, firms, and companies. So if you believe in the mission, we would love you to consider making a gift. And now I want to introduce the great Karen Schaeffer. And Karen has been a friend to the foundation for many years, and also in 2007 was chair of the board of CFP Board. So she is a phenomenal expert in this area. She is a managing member and co-founder of Schaeffer Financial, a financial consulting firm in the DC area, and she's been advising clients for over 40 years and developed a diverse client base, including professional women, foreign service officers, foreign nationals, and importantly, and especially relevant for tonight, so many federal government employees. In addition to her financial planning practice, she's a popular lecturer and seminar leader, and she's spoken at global financial planning conferences, and in fact represented CFP Board at the Financial Planning Standards Board meetings around the world, talking about the evolution of the profession on a global scale. Organizations that have drawn on Karen's expertise include the World Bank, the Department of the Treasury, the IMF, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Department of State. And I will give special props to Karen because she just finished a 5-hour session with about more than 700 employees of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And she's in high demand right now. So we really, really appreciate her taking the time to share her knowledge with all of us. So Karen, without further ado, thank you so much. I'm going to stop share.
All right.
And turn it over to you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And let me get my slides up as well. And thank everybody for joining us today. Let's get us over here. Slideshow, please. There we go. All right. So I feel like I can finally take a deep breath. It has been a day. Actually, it's been quite a season. But I'm so pleased that all of you want to help, and there's a lot of need out there. So what I want to do, I didn't put together an awful lot of slides, and there are slides that we won't go into as much detail as you might need or want. The idea here isn't to make you a federal benefits expert, but to make sure that you really can, to the best of your ability, help guide these employees through these tough decisions that some of them are going to have to make with a very short turnaround. John mentioned I've been talking to Fish and Wildlife Agency employees for 5 hours today. Joanne McGarren, who's my colleague, who's also, she'll be answering questions. She's the benefit expert, and she had them for 2 days, 2 sessions earlier this week. And what she just told us as we were getting ready to go live was they've announced that they literally will be having massive across the board uh, cutbacks, and employees will have until next week, the 26th, to make their decisions. So even if you can't get your head around exactly the nuances of all of these choices, we're going to give you enough material so that you'll know what you don't know. So like the physician, do no harm. And there's an awful lot of just your basic financial planning expertise that will help them. I also wanted to, so Joanne McGarren and I have known each other and worked together for now almost 40 years. She really is an expert, and she'll be trying to answer as many of your detailed kind of benefits questions in the Q&A. Put those in the Q&A, not the chat if you can. That's where she'll be looking for your questions. And then I also have Brandon Keir, who is works with me at Schaeffer Financial, and not only is he a brilliant colleague, but he's also a certified financial planner and a veteran. So he has his own thrift savings plan, and he's been holding the hand of many a nervous federal government employee for the past few weeks. He related one story to us. He had one woman he was working with last week. She was told her job's abolished, she had to leave, and then she was, nope, you got to report back for duty. Kidding, just kidding. Twice that happened to her in a matter of a week. So it's a pretty tense time out there, and the more we can do to get good information to them, the better they're going to be. So we're going to be there, try to give them a little peace of mind. What I thought we'd do first is just go through just a little bit about the federal retirement system. And then if you've got a specific question about that, Joanne will try to answer it in the back. Rachel's going to save some of those for me as well. And what those options are for retirement. It depends on what system you're in, and then what's the retirement system. I'm going to focus on the newer one, which does have Social Security with it. I've got some slides on the health benefits, long-term care and insurances, and slides on thrift, just so you get that overview. And then I also wanted to spend a little bit of time to encourage you to do this pro bono work without having to give up your practice and without limiting the advice you give to one or two people, because you really can give good advice, focused advice, in an hour. And I'll show you how I've been doing that as an employee benefit at the IMF and a couple other organizations, and just to give you perhaps an idea of what you want to format your pro bono experiences with, so you can reach as many people as possible. I have a feeling we're going to be inundated. All right, so we all know this has been thrust upon us, and we're all just trying to do our best. So whether or not you're eligible to get a pension is going to just depend on which retirement system you're actually in, and which of the retirement options you qualify for based on how old you are and your years of creditable service. Now, Joanne could go on and on about this creditable service. Everything counts, right? My husband has 2 years as a Peace Corps volunteer, and we used to think, oh, don't lose the evidence of that, because we might want you to go back to work as a federal government employee and get 3 more years so we can get health insurance. But again, we're going to try to keep this a little higher level so that you're when you have to bring in a benefits person or get on that OPM website or coach your your client to work with their human resources people. So the big different kinds, we call it the old system and the new system. CSRS was the old system and FERS is the newer system. And the reason we made the decision to just focus mostly on the FERS system is because pretty much everybody hired after 84 was automatically put in that system. And of course, we can have exceptions to that. What if somebody was in the old system, took a little break and came back? Um, and Joanne can coach you through those if you need that a little bit. And then we had more recently some I like son of furs, right? Some variations on the theme, and it really had to do with how much they were contributing to the system, and what came out of their paycheck and how they're handled to get the same benefit or to get their benefit. So when you're looking at somebody's pay stub or you're wondering, you know, where how much money they're really contributing and when that stops, how's that going to affect their retirement, they do pay in to their whichever system they're in. They do pay in to every um, system, every paycheck. Some money is coming out to their retirement. We call it their pension, their civil service retirement. There also could be a disability retirement if they were eligible for that, but they're also paying into Social Security and they have the option to pay into the Thrift Savings Plan. Their agency puts in 1% for them and then will match up to 5%. So that technically is optional, but they, for the most part, the message is out that that's also coming out of their paycheck. They're making their contributions. But it's gonna be tough because a lot of people weren't really ready to retire. A lot of people aren't anywhere near where they thought they were going to be when they stepped away from these used to be pretty secure jobs. And we've got to make sure that as financial planners, we're showing them why we think this is your best option, or this is, I don't know about this. You better look into this because this is kind of a big deal over here. Things like, will you have health insurance? Or what are your options if you don't have, if you're losing your health insurance as well? So normally we would just talk about regular old retirement, and if you were eligible for a regular retirement, that means that you would immediately get your pension, and it would be based on what year you were born and how much creditable service. So how many years of service do you really have? If you're taking an early retirement, that's where we're now seeing the agencies trying to downsize through these voluntary early retirement authorities, VERA, or discontinued service retirement, or the VSIP. And it's not always either or, it can be and VSIP is the one where you actually get a little bit of money. But I gotta tell you, in all the years that we've been doing this is not the first time that Joanne and I have been through the VSIP or the VERA opportunities. Very rarely does it make sense to take the amount of money that they're offering you on a VSIP at $25,000 when you can work through the end of the year and make much more than that, or work maybe even keep your job. So usually it's somebody who's pretty okay from your opinion as a financial planner to retire that we could say, well, yeah, maybe take it. What we worry about is people getting just so emotionally um, beat down, angry, frustrated. We can keep going, right? All the very human emotions, and making the wrong decision here to say, I'm out of here, and missing something that could be very important for them. So really, all of VERA is giving the agencies the authority to downsize. And what the hope is that if you offer people the ability to get out without getting that all those years of service that you might otherwise need for a regular retirement, then we'll open up positions for people who do want to stay. And so it's sort of a selective downsizing. It should save somebody else from losing their job or being demoted to a job that needs to be filled. Discontinued service just means that. It's involuntary retirement, but it gives you an immediate annuity. And when I'm saying annuity here, I mean that federal annuity, that federal pension annuity. Of course, if you're fired, you're not eligible for that. That would be discontinued service. But these days, we're seeing they may be able to have an immediate pension, even though just because it was a discontinued service. We don't need their service anymore. And then VSIP is where they get some incentive to actually move on. And for most part, it's the lesser of $25,000 or some severance calculation that gets made. So it could be we're going to do the Vera and offer, and it's really important that you help your clients look beyond today. $25,000 is a lot of money to a lot of people, but it's very little money if it's got to mean that for the rest of your life we're scrambling, right? All right, so we got our total length of service. Once we figure out all that creditable service, we need to know what their average high three salary is, and then we plug in the formula. That's basically how you figure out a retirement salary. Since there are not that many CSRS people still out there, we're going to focus more on the formula for the FERS. So the first thing you have to know is, are you old enough to retire? And that depends on the year that you were born. And this is kind of, remember how Social Security raised the eligibility for a full pension from 65 to 67. It was done pretty slowly in tiny little increments here. But, back in the day, you could retire at 55. When I started working with federal government employees, you could retire with a pension at the age of 55 and 30 years of service. But now they've inched it up a little bit to 57, right? And then, of course, I want you to just know that there are different rules and requirements for different categories of federal government employees. I'm listing them there for you on the slide, so that not because I'm expecting you to remember all of that, but just for you to have a little sensitivity to asking the questions. Well, most employees do know. If they're firefighters or controllers, they have different age requirements or years of service. So start with where they are, but you don't want to be in a position of saying, no, 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 you can't retire. You need more years of service. It's a little different for some of these categories. Again, Joanne said, "Oh, Karen, that slide's a little too confusing," and I left it in because I wanted you to see how different retirements are. We're not going to go through all of them, but if I wanted a full immediate benefit, I want my pension as I walk out the door, I have to have 30 years of service and be, let's say, 57 now, right? Most people, or if I only had 20 years of service, but I'm already 60, I could get my immediate benefit. Or look at that last one there under number 1. I only need 5 years of service if I'm 62. And that can be really important if somebody is thought they were going to do, federal government work as a second career. Did my full career, but I wanted to go in and work on something in particular, or I wanted to go to federal government service and make to qualify for health insurance. These full immediate benefit all come not just with the pension, but with health insurance as well. And that's kind of a big thing, right? But there's a different kind of retirement called MRA plus 10, and it's with a reduced the benefit gets reduced, but it can be immediate or postponed. So I could just take a reduced benefit, like I want out of here. So as long as I have my age requirement, I'm at least 57 years old, I'll go ahead and take a reduction because I don't have my full years of service. As long as I'm old enough and I got my 10 years of service, I can actually qualify for a pension. It's a reduced service, and maybe I don't need it. Maybe I have already established myself as a financially secure person, and I just want to get out of here. But if I really need health insurance, maybe what I could do is postpone it. So I don't. What do I need more? Do I need health insurance, or I need the immediate benefit of the pension? Because if I postpone it, I might have a gap in when I have health insurance, but I don't get the reduced pension. So some of the then we went through, you got the VERA, the discontinued service, the deferred um, full benefit, right? And then just law enforcement. I think this is just a nice little chart for you to see if which retirement system, and just ask, which retirement system have you gotten any estimates from HR? Do you know which type of retirement um, is best for you, or are we trying to figure that out, right? Because a lot of people do come to the classes that Joanne and I teach, so they'll have a sense of it, and they just need the encouragement to hear from somebody else. I think this one makes more sense for you because, and we'll go through what the different ramifications are. So this slide is where you're kind of seeing the difference. We've got somebody who's 57 years old, 20 years of service, and no VERA or DSR is going to be available to them. If they took that immediate, I want my pension, because I've got at least 10 years in, but I don't have the 30 years, right? I'm old enough, but I need more years of service, and I just want out. What happens is they're going to get, instead of 20% of their highest three average. I probably should have had a separate slide on that for you now that I think about it. But the formula is pretty basic. I think I have another slide coming up. The You get 1% of your average high three salary for every year of service. Okay, makes sense. So in this case, I got a 57-year-old with 20 years of service, and they would normally get the 20% of their high three, but they're only 57 and they're not eligible for that regular retirement because they need 30 years of service. So they decide, all right, I want out of here on this immediate MRA with at least 10 years of service. They've got plenty of that. Instead of getting 20%, their pension's going to be reduced by 5%. Because they're under the age requirement. And the example is really for if they were 4 years and 11 months short of age 62, which is what they would need to retire with only 20 years of service, right? Then we reduce it by 5%, so they get 15% of their salary, and health insurance. FEHB is the federal health insurance acronym. And so if that's the most important thing in the family, and getting a little bit of income, that might be worth doing. I haven't seen too many people do that. What I've seen more of over the years, not necessarily in these hazy, crazy times, but somebody who is just done, right? They're done with this. They want to get out, but and do something else, work someplace else, but they know they're going to want health insurance later, and because they're going to find another job, they don't really need that immediate pension. They don't want the reduction, so they just postpone it. And in this case, they would be able to reinstate as early as age 60 their their pension. They would be able as early as age 60 to get their pension, and the health insurance gets reinstated at that time. And I've had more than a handful of those in the last several years, as the jobs got a little frustrating and private sector was offering something else, and this turned out to be the best deal for them. Clearly, it's much easier to think about these MRA plus 10s if you've got somebody who came to orientation class, and learned how valuable their Thrift Savings Plan was, which is their 401k plan, and they got a good looking amount of money in that. or you're talking to somebody who's very employable. And these days, you gotta have the conversation with what do you think your income potential is, um, right now? And it's hard, right? Because so many people, are probably looking for jobs, in the next month or 2. So we could also, just go ahead and work, right? If we get all the way to age 60, we now have 23 years of service, so we're gonna get a higher, um, percentage of their high 23%. Or if they made it to they hung in there somehow and didn't get shown the door or forced out or, run screaming for their sanity, if they can stay just 2 more years, not only do they have, a higher percentage of their salary, the formula changes. Instead of 1% of their highest 3-year average earnings, they get 1.1%. So you might want to just come back to this slide a couple of times. It takes a while for it to sink in if this is not your world each and every day. I remember sitting in the back of Joanne's class waiting for my turn to go on, and I must have heard this 100 times before I finally said, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I know. Yeah, no, MRA plus whatever." All the acronyms are a little off-putting, but this is a nice slide for you to see. Somebody with 57 who's 57, 20 years of service. This is what we would normally be looking at. And then you as a financial planner would just coach them through and say, "No, I know you're tired, but you got to stay till at least 62. Work with me here. You got to hang in there." Or whatever was best for them, right? The other thing you need to know is that if somebody is actually eligible to retire, under the federal government system before age 62, and when they'd be eligible for a Social Security check, they're automatically gonna get this, what's called the annuity supplement. And you don't have to apply for it. It just comes, right? And it's really based on, it almost always looks very much like if you pulled up your Social Security earnings statement and what would I get at age 62? That's the benefit they get roughly. I mean, there's a formula for doing it, but for quick and dirty, that's what we use. But it stops at age 62. And at age 62, you're gonna have to help them, guide them through, do they actually apply for Social Security or postpone that, all right? And it's not much different than advising anybody on when to take that Social Security check. The You know how it works. That we're really discouraged from earning a living if we're taking a Social Security check at age 62, and that keeps up until we get our full retirement age under Social Security, which for most people now is going to be 67 or at least 66 and some months, right? So you'll go through the same kind of coaching skills with them, and it'll be based on, right? Well, how healthy are they? How long are they likely to live? And I don't know is the correct answer to that question. Even if you've got a diagnosis, it's still, I don't know. But we're going to use our best judgment on, is it very likely that, even 50-50, that this is a person who might live into their 80s. We got to be really careful about taking that check at 62 and saying you don't need to work again. Just even, as you know, a little bit of part-time work means we're giving back that Social Security check for, a dollar for every 2 we earn over just a small amount. But you are gonna see some people who have some real cash needs, that are very pressing, and this might take the edge off. Some people really have particular plans for the money. I had a woman who was late, bloomer, as she called herself, in her career, but she had gone to an all-girls school that changed her life, really turned her into a student, really gave her confidence, and then life intervened, and she didn't go right on to college. And when she finally did go to college, and it took her a long time, And then she finally found a career that she was very good at with the federal government. She loved it. And when I met her, she was one of those 70-something-year-olds, uh, who was, looked like she was, 50 and was planning to continue to work. But of course, when you get into your 70s, it's not always your choice, right? When we first met, um, in her early 60s, we talked about when to take her Social Security check, and we decided that she would take it well below 70, but closer to her full retirement age, because what she could do while she was earning a full salary is um, make a contribution, sponsor another student, to give another student at this school that she went to an opportunity. And she said, I'm not going to be able to do that my whole life, but if I could do that for a few years. So that's what we carved out. We'll do it with the Social Security check while you're still working and getting no penalty on it. We'll wait till her full retirement age under Social Security, but well below the age 70, because every month counts there. Some people we need to coach to just hang in there a little bit, so that their surviving spouse could get the full check. If we wait till age 70, there's a big difference for if the spouse doesn't have much of a Social Security benefit on their own. And, then there still are people who are gonna be in the workforce. They're restless. They have, um, uh an opportunity to work, and so we make sure they understand it's a bad idea to take your Social Security check then before your age. So, my point to you on all of this is we don't need to, if you're trying to give your best advice, listen to what their needs are. No, remember what you already know about Social Security, and I don't think you necessarily need to put this in a spreadsheet for them or run it through a program to optimize it. Keep it a bigger picture, and you'll be able to help them make a good decision nonetheless. You'll hear other terminology out there, what that I've mentioned this creditable service, what counts, that would be something you can get from the OPM website, or just you wanna, make sure your client understands it. But some people have come in and out of government, and they have some big decisions about deposits and redeposits, and that's something that even after all these years, I always look it up, and then I always send it to a benefit specialist and say, "Am I missing anything here?" Because the consequences of not getting credit for some previous employment, or for not knowing if I deposited that, I might make the money back in a better looking pension in just a couple of years. So I ask people to look at um, the OPM handbook. The website is it's very detailed, almost too detailed. I just wanted to bring up one little consideration on the older retirement system. If you meet somebody who's CSRS, you always want to ask if they voluntarily contributed to CSRS. There was that involuntary money coming out of their paycheck for the higher benefit. If you worked under CSRS for 41 and a half years, or probably felt like 141 and a half years, you got the maximum benefit under the formula, and it was like 80% of your high three salary. And that was all based on what came out of your paycheck and what your agency matched as well. But they could voluntarily put in a little bit more. And it never really made sense as a formula. What you were getting for that formula wasn't enough incentive. It was kind of like buying treasury bonds, it wasn't real growth there. But there was a really nice and it's still there, strategy for pulling that voluntary savings before you retire right into a Roth IRA. And so um, just my point to you would be, if you do, and it's not likely you'll meet a lot of them, come across CSRS people, ask them if they ever did voluntary contribution, or if they know what it is. And if, because there's a way to get a fair amount of money into this retirement system and then move it to an IRA with, do that conversion and get tax-free growth going forward. So it's a little obscure, but when it works great. All right. So the health insurance, you probably heard, everybody thinks that the federal government employees have fabulous health insurance, and it's pretty darn good, right? There's all kinds of different choices, open season every single year. So as they are at different stages of life or health, they can change it up and do the high deductible or the low deductible, have the family coverage. But to carry this pretty darn good health insurance into retirement, they have to have been enrolled in it for 5 years prior to retirement. So my son-in-law works at the World Bank, and the World Bank has even better health insurance. So if my daughter was a federal government employee, she might still choose to be on his health insurance, right? Well, the World Bank's going through a big reorganization as well, and they're cutting their footprint in Washington by 50%. His job might be permanently sent overseas. He's a local guy. He grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. So this is kind of like, oh. If my daughter was worried he was going to lose his job, the first thing she should do if she was a federal government employee, she's not, but she should definitely sign up for the health insurance and then sort of duck under the chaos and make sure she can get and keep it for at least 5 years before she loses her job. So right now, there's a lot of people who need to understand this. You don't just get to take the health insurance into retirement. It's 5 years prior to retirement. I think at least a couple times a year, we teach a class where somebody is all set to retire, and financially they are, but they hadn't been on the health insurance, they were on somebody else's. So we might need to bring that back. Um, we if somebody's gonna not be able to take health insurance into retirement, there's still something like Cobra. It's very expensive. Sometimes, I've gotten a few phone calls with, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's this much." And I said, "No, that's once a month. You didn't." They're used to seeing their contribution to their health insurance, in their paychecks. They get 26 pays in most years. And so they know they've got to pay the full rate, the employer and their own rate. But when they're going into uh, the the Cobra, it looks like a huge, even more huge number because it'll just be paid monthly. And so the other thing that has changed in the years that we've been giving advice is we never used to think federal government employees needed to sign up for Medicare Part B 40 years ago. And somewhere along the line, it became very clear that most people need to take a real um, good look at this Medicare Part B. There are so many different plans that some of the plans actually say, well, if you were eligible for Part B and you didn't take it, we're not going to cover anything better than what Medicare. We're not going to reimburse your providers for anything more than what Medicare would have done. And yet, if you sign up for Medicare Part B, the coverage really can be very, very comprehensive. So I don't know if how many of you know the name Katie Votava, but she is married to a certified financial planner that was part of CFP Board many years ago, and he the and so she was very attuned. She was a nurse and went on to get her doctorate in um, medical economics or anyway, she made this her passion, and she helps with Medicare enrollment with a pretty good grounding in what financial planners need or know. And I had her come speak to our local financial planning association group, and one of the first questions she got is, why would a federal government employee enroll in Part B? 20 minutes later, she finished her answer, but it was because she has read every single one of those many federal group health um, benefit options that people have, and she came up with examples of what would not be covered had we not signed up for Part B. There are a couple little pitfalls for people to just be aware of when you sign up for Part B. Um, it's a cost, right? So people are gonna have to pay for it, and if other family members are dependent on them, and are enrolled in their plan, they might not be eligible for Medicare yet, so and the plan, what it pays might be reduced for them, so you wanna get on the phone with somebody from your plan and just say, "Work with me. How is this really gonna work here?" And then, of course, this is what everybody complains about is as I start taking money out of my thrift savings plan, I might get bounced into that higher Medicare Part B premium land. And we just have to give them perspective, right? On what, how much more is it and for how long? And it's probably a temporary thing. That does get adjusted every year. Um, I haven't seen it be enough of a reason not to go ahead and take the Medicare Part B. They also have an ability to get some life insurance. It's a group term life insurance policy program known as we call it FEGLI, FEGLI insurance. Um, and when you first start with the federal government, you have a basic federal group life coverage unless you waive it. And some people, if they waive it, they can't get back in unless there's a qualifying life event. So it's just regular old term insurance, but instead of it being level for 20 years or whatever you would recommend to a typical young person, right? It's sort of a level for 5 years. It goes up in 5-year steps. And younger people actually get a higher benefit. The basic amount is just 1% of one multiple of your salary. So, if you get hired and your starting salary is $75,000, you've automatically got $75,000 worth of life insurance unless you're younger. And so what happens is that you get a little extra life insurance because you're paying the same premium. But then as you get older, on significant birthdays that end in 5 or zeros, you just look at what the heck happened to my paycheck here. Welcome to another pricing band under the FEGLI Group Life. So the basic amount is subsidized. It doesn't cost that much. And we didn't want people to waive it, uh, but but the options, the extra multiples of your income, um, those are you can buy up to 5 times your income. Those are not subsidized. The basic amount, which eventually is just one multiple of your income, is a pretty decent deal. And it doesn't, you don't, if I told a 20-something-year-old, oh, you don't need any life insurance, get rid of your basic amount, wait, they can buy me coffee once a week kind of thing. But once people really do have a need for some life insurance, they have financially dependent survivors, then we say any healthy non-smoker at any age can find cheaper term life insurance outside of federal group life. So you know how it works, right? We whatever insurance, if you notice that they've got an insurance need or you calculate or plan with them that they've got a need, we get the less expensive individual policy in place. They're doubly insured for at least a month. And then we let the federal group life options, those additional coverages, drop back down to the basic. I haven't found the family coverage to be any special deal either. And so if you, it's, it, and for for people, these people in particular right now, it's kind of important to have my life insurance separate from an employee benefit when my employment is so tenuous and fraught, right? So whether or not they go into another group plan or an individual policy, a lot of people are going to need to be moving their life insurance or risk um, being without coverage for a while. If you're going to take your federal group life into retirement, you can do that if you're retiring and eligible for one of those immediate annuities. But again, it just keeps getting more expensive. And so if I really was meeting somebody of true retirement age that still needed life insurance, we would have grabbed that already and gotten them life insurance outside of the federal government. I often, though, even for somebody who, healthy non-smoker, very insurable, easy underwriting, I almost always have them keep the basic because there's an interesting option when you retire from the federal government and you have federal group life basic insurance. You can choose the option to have it reduce by 75%. You only pay premium till you're age 65. So when you're talking to that, you know, early 60s, late 50s even crowd, and you actually show them how much this basic life insurance is costing, you've paid for it all of this time. It'll be free at age 65 and you'll never pay again, but the benefit is gonna drop pretty quickly by 75%. So if I'm going out with a $100,000 salary and I'm 63 years old, I'm gonna pay premium for another 2 years and never pay premium again. If I die at 65, there's a $100,000 death benefit going to my named beneficiary, and in a couple of years, it's $25,000. And what I always ask people to do is name their favorite charity. So if I had my FEGLI group life insurance that was going to be 25% of my final highest three salary with the federal government, or my salary actually, at when I retire, I'd be splitting that 50% with the Foundation for Financial Planning and the Center for Financial Planning, that CFP Board, programs for our future workforce. So people can make those decisions. I think it's such a waste to have paid for this little bit of life insurance when it could be powerful to leave it to their favorite charities. It's about this time of night when my cursor is tired. Long-term care insurance is going to be a tough conversation, and in your pro bono work, it may not come up because you'll have lots of other fires to be putting out and lots of other we need to focus and prioritize what we're going to work on. But it will come up, and it will come up because people are hearing about it. People are taking care of their aging parents, and they see up close and personal, um, how much money it takes, how much time it takes. Even the federal government had a program. They never necessarily subsidized the premium, but they administered it and underwrote some of the overhead a little bit. And even the federal long-term care plan isn't taking applications right now. For people who have the plan, the benefits, they were offered reduced benefits at the same cost, and for the most part, it was still worth it for them to keep their life insurance with maybe a reduced inflation benefit, something like that. But uh, we don't know what's going to happen with that plan, and we all know that the underwriting on long-term care insurance policies is much tighter, and the recommending a whole life policy is so expensive, and we're going to meet a lot of people that's um, not an option at all. So I've been coaching people into thinking of the equity in their home as their long-term care. I've been coaching people into working longer, so we had a bigger nest egg. And I've been coaching people into understanding that the decisions they make in their 50s are really going to be key to having some options when the likelihood of needing care is 70% for people. We've got to really bring this one back up when we get through the more immediate decisions they have to make. So the benefit that you probably will have the most comfortable time with, because it's much like a 401k plan, is the Thrift Savings Plan. If you're under the bulk of the people are under the FERS system, the newer retirement system, they're getting a 5% match if they put in at least 5%. The old retirement system doesn't get that match, but we've always encouraged CSRS people to contribute. And eventually, I think most of them came around to actually putting some money in. Oops, now it bubbled up again. Okay, so it's the same contribution limits as you'd have with any 401k, 403b, TIAF. And these are your fund choices. They have core choices. The G fund is kind of like buying a treasury bill without a maturity date. You can go to tsp.gov and see what it's paying. These days, it can change monthly. The F fund is the Bloomberg Barclays Aggregate U.S. Bond Market Index with short-term, intermediate, and long-term government and corporate bonds. C fund is the S&P 500. The S fund is the Dow Jones Completion Index. And the I fund was, until last year, the EAFE, the 20 countries or so. And the Thrift Board has been trying since, 2019 or something, to make it more of a total global. And Congress kept pushing back. You can't make certain changes to the Thrift Savings Plan without congressional approval. Enough said there, right? It takes forever. But what the Congress didn't like about trying to make this a total global fund like every other 401k plan has, which, totally justifiable under any kind of investment asset allocation model, it was that they didn't want federal government employees investing in China, in companies in China, which might be part of the Chinese weapons manufacturing. Okay, so consultants were hired, and it took forever. But just last year, this morphed into much more of a total global, with large, mid-size, small cap, wherever possible, companies outside the U.S., but also not China, Taiwan, or Hong Kong, or nations that we don't recognize like North Korea, right? So it's better than it was, and your clients didn't have to do a thing. If they had money in the I fund, they had EAFE, and it sort of morphed and was completely updated just recently, last year. So they now have it's a total global option. They also have these L funds. There are 10 L funds, and guess what the L funds use? G, F, C, S, and I, reading left to right in that order. And what you'll notice about these L funds is that nobody's using that bond fund at all. None of them have a significant position in that bond fund. And that's a little annoying. And you'll notice also that any minute now, we're going to you'll see that it's moving quarterly like a lot of target date funds, slowly at first. So the 2070, the 2065, the 2060 all kind of look identical. They're, you know, where they're different. 1% is split between G and F, cash and bonds, a little bit differently in those three funds. But then it starts moving pretty quickly, and the last 10 years, you're basically giving up growth and sitting in a cash position. So we don't worry about market drifting. It rebalances as needed to keep these positions, but it moves pretty steadily. And because it starts off so slow, people just aren't aware of that. So, that it picks up, and you say, I used to like my thrift plan, but I'm not making any money, and it's because they needed to push out to, an L fund that gave them a little bit more growth. The website says these are designed for you to pick one. You're going to meet people that have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and an extra little dose of CNS, for whatever reason. But we really do try to coach people to either be do-it-yourselfers, come up with the allocation that meets your needs with some combination of some of the five choices, and or pick an L fund. And the L funds actually become a little bit more important in retirement, in my opinion, than they do when they're working. I mean, they've been a great idea for people who just aren't into this, or are procrastinators or overthinkers, always thinking they've got to listen to the news and then go tinker with their investment allocations, which is always at the expense of performance, as you know. But one of the things that it would be really nice for you to impress upon anybody you work with, is that they haven't really seen market volatility be a problem, because the market has, for their whole career, most likely been up way more than it's been down. And of course, when it's down, they've been buying because it's payroll deducted every payday. The minute they retire or get separated from service in any of those many ways, what happens? They lose their ability to buy on the dip, and volatility needs to be managed differently. They, well, I've met people. I met somebody who became a client after he made the biggest mistake of his life. He had over $1 million in his thrift savings plan in 2008. There is no way you had $1 million in your thrift plan in 2008 unless it was 100% in stock. He retired, didn't need the money, and why would he change CS&I, right? They're his besties, made him a millionaire. He was taking his once in a lifetime big deal, hey, I'm retired trip, was all the way over across the world in Australia. And remember what happened in 2008? Of course you do. And he got scared. And he said, I don't know, I know better. Like, intellectually, he knew markets drop and markets recover, right? But he said it was the combination of having never really seen it be that violent before, and being so far away from everybody and everything, that he sold a lot. And it was that misstep that he said, I need somebody looking over my shoulder. I can't trust my own emotions to stay in check. So that was a real good um, lesson for me to learn, that, put it on the checklist of talking to people. You're either going to have to sort of go with the L income fund. That's what the experts decided was appropriate for people who are no longer adding and may need to be actively spending down. Not a lot of volatility there, but what else isn't there? Any opportunity to keep pace with inflation long term, right? So it's one of the reasons that some people will choose to move to an IRA to get a better bond option, to get better moderate options, a better balance. But make sure that you're at least pointing out volatility is real, and we're going to have to pay attention to it once we're no longer adding. They do have the option to put some money in Roth. Up until this year, all the agency match has been going into traditional. All the contributions from the employee have been going into traditional, unless they opted to have some of their contribution go into the Roth. And now, going forward, starting next year, the catch-up, anything over age 50, extra amounts will go into Roth, and they have an opportunity to convert existing traditional money. Up until then, they didn't. We don't get to invest them differently. Whatever investment option you pick for the traditional will be the Roth, but you know how that the difference, and how to counsel somebody on whether it makes sense to be paying more in taxes now, and hope they don't change the tax laws and that you live a long time and it all works out, or just go ahead and get the traditional, get the deduction, and we'll deal with taxes later. It is possible to do a loan against your thrift plan. It's pretty much always a bad idea, not because it costs very much. They just charge a low interest rate and a little $50 loan origination fee. The interest goes back into the borrower's thrift account. But what we have to be really careful of right now is if people get separated from service with these loans outstanding, it'll be considered a loan in default. They've got to make arrangements to quickly get that paid back or get on a payment plan with that, or the thrift board is going to declare it a loan in default, because automatically when they signed up for the loan, it was repaid through payroll deduction, and they aren't going to have a paycheck. So highlight that, make sure they don't have a default on the loan, have to pay the income tax on it next year, and depending on their age, that 5% penalty. But you know how this works. It's always a bad idea to borrow against their thrift savings plan, because they only get the G fund rate and not the growth rate. This example shows a small little loan paid back in a short period of time cost them $16,000 and growing 30 years into the future. So it always was kind of a bad idea. But now we've got to just really be looking out for those people who do, in fact, have the loans. The other thing I'll say that I've talked to enough people just in the last 2 weeks. A lot of people are really assuming if I lose my job, I'll just have to take money out of the thrift savings plan. You know, I mean, they're just it's the closest. It's the biggest asset. It's the first thing that's top of mind for solution. And what they don't know is how expensive it is to take money out of a retirement plan when you're in your 30s and 40s, right? You'll never make that back up in your lifetime. And it's not $30,000 or $40,000. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So if you can show them some examples on why that's a bad idea, I would appreciate it, right? It's easy to get money out of thrift if people have actually retired and they're at least 55 years old. They can take a partial withdrawal. They just request it. It used to be hideously slow and complicated, but since 2019, they've got a new back office system, and since 2022, even better. So people are getting money within 3 to 5 business days until they do the downsizing at the thrift board. I haven't heard about that one, right? And if they know they need money on a regular basis, they can set up scheduled payments to be monthly, quarterly, annually, start and stop whenever they want. Huge improvement. Used to be you had to, if you could do one partial withdrawal in your entire life, and then it was monthly withdrawals after that. If by February you realized you had asked for too little or too much, too bad, you had to stick with it for a full year. So it's really a very easy planning tool, like an IRA, pretty easy to do. Single payment is thrift speak for close the account. I wish they would just say close the account, because some people have mistakenly requested a single payment, assuming they had 60 days to roll it into an IRA, and they don't. I met a woman who requested the money, got it into a traditional IRA, and 2.5 years later got the nasty gram from the IRS, off with your head. You weren't allowed to do that. You took a distribution. You didn't do a rollover, and there was no do-over. So just make sure if people are moving money to their next employer's 401k or into an individual retirement account, they're doing direct transfers. And the annuity option is the option that I can honestly say I have never been able to even come up with a scenario where I thought this might be worth explaining to somebody. I think Joanne has seen one. She didn't think it was a great idea, but it wasn't hurting somebody. I mean, we talked to hundreds and hundreds of people every week. So, but there is the annuity option, and people are going to ask you about it because when people are scared, they want guarantees, and this sounds like a guarantee, and technically it is. MetLife has had the contract forever. You can have some, if or all of your thrift money go into the annuity option and get payments for the rest of your life. The annuity calculator on the website was off. It was giving the same dollar amount for a 50-year-old and a 70-year-old. I don't know if they fixed that, but I haven't followed up with it because it's just not something that we've been recommending. They do offer all the various, joint and survivor, 10-year certain, inflation protected. But don't forget, a lot of these people will have pensions, which are guaranteed, predictable, inflation protected, longevity protected pensions. And what I'm finding they need is the flexibility. Take money out of your thrift plan when you really need it, not an annuity. All right. When you do take money out of your thrift savings plan, it comes out prorated from all of your positions. This would be another reason some people would want to move money to an IRA so they can do targeted withdrawals. Let's take it from cash when the market's down. Let's take it from the market when the market's up, or from that position that we now want to wean it down a bit. You can tell them don't take it out of the Roth, and that's new. I mean, for a while there, money was coming out of Roth accounts that had only been in Roth accounts for a couple of years when people were taking distributions, but it's always prorated. So if you've got money in that L income fund, 69% of it is coming out of the G fund, out of cash, and 31% is coming out of some combination of bonds and stock, regardless of where the market is. If the market is tanking, you have plenty of cash, but you can't do the targeted withdrawal. Technically, you can go back in the next day and rebalance it. I'm just not finding a lot of people who can figure out how to do that, or I would trust them to do it, because it's just not a concept that people outside of the investment world see the impact of before it's too late, right? You can do required minimum distributions from the thrift savings plan. That's new. Before, if you turn 70 and a half, you could no longer have an account with the thrift board. And sadly, people didn't know you could transfer that right into an IRA and keep pushing off the taxes. So there were some missteps there, but now they can. What you want to remind your client to do, if they're going to leave their money with the thrift board, you have to remind them, once they're separated from service and they hit the age for required minimum distributions based on the year that they were born, that the thrift board needs to have current information from them. The thrift board knows that they retire, knows how old they are, certainly knows how to do the calculation for the RMD. What don't they know? Are they waiting until the end of December to do the required minimum distribution? So as the clock is ticking down at the end of the year, they go ahead and send them the money if they can find them. So I've done this training at the thrift board, and I always ask, what's the most important message I can give federal government employees as they're retiring? Tell them they have to keep their contact information, their bank routing information, their snail mail address current with the thrift board. Oh, that was a weird thing. That's the most important thing? It is, because until they retire, their agency has done that for them. This is not on their radar screen. They don't know they have to do this. And if if they've fail to take a required minimum distribution, as you know, they're going to face that 25% penalty. So just a little tip you can mention to them, make sure they're keeping their information current with the Thrift Board. Another difference between IRAs and the Thrift Board, only a spouse can be a thrift beneficiary participant. I did not say only a spouse could be a thrift beneficiary, but only a spouse could leave their account there. So if I'm a federal government employee and I have a spouse and children, I'm going to name my spouse first, and then if he's not around, the kids to be my beneficiaries. I die, my husband Rick gets the money. Rick dies moments later, brokenhearted, could happen. And now the kids have the money all comes out. They cannot leave an account there, right? Let's back it up and try it again. I'm the Fed, I die, Rick gets the money, and somehow in his grief, he knows that to move the money to an IRA. Even though he could leave it with thrift and do those scheduled or partial withdrawals, he can also move it to an IRA. And then he dies moments later, brokenhearted. And then the non-spouse beneficiaries have typically the 10 years to get the money out. The other important bullet point on this website is the Thrift Board only accepts their form, not a copy of the form, it has to be in their account online. And that's kind of new. People used to be, in a not too distant past with the government and benefits, everything was paper, right? So it's not now. And when they did that big database upgrade in June of 2022, some things got lost. We've all had this problem with database upgrades, but when I would teach a large class, I'd always ask, hey, during lunch, just log in and see if your beneficiary designation made it. And it was kind of shocking how many said, wow, I know I have one, but it's not there. So they just, word to the wise, fill out those beneficiary designations. All right, I'm going to pause here and see, Rachel, if you have any questions that I should be answering for you.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. It's amazing. So I'll start reading through some of the questions. I'm going to
Okay.
start with like the ones at the bottom where the topics may be more familiar. So is it true that if you leave your TSP to a spouse and you die and then the spouse dies, there is an immediate distribution to those beneficiaries of the spouse?
It is true. It is true. And we had a case where the surviving spouse was actually in the process of moving it to an IRA. And they were both dying in there, before they had spent money. Mom passed away, shockingly. He was the one with some health problems. And then he died, even though he was doing his best to get the paperwork done. This was a client of an accountant we've done business with forever. And there was nothing we could do. So a lot of money all got taxed in 1 year. Yep.
Just to clarify, the partial and systematic are flexible and can change any time.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And it didn't used to be like that. So if you were thinking, I heard this was a lot harder, it was a nightmare, but that's a very important upgrade to the thrift plan.
My client and I were looking at the reducing FEGLI, FEGLI options. The 75% reduction says it reduces by 2%. Is this 2% each month or 24%?
No, it's a month. So it goes very quickly from in my example, $100,000 down to $25,000 in a little over 2 years.
Can you elaborate on the death benefits of the Thrift Savings Plan? There are a lot of restrictions that many participants most likely don't know about, i.e. 90 days for non-spouse beneficiaries to roll over the inherited TSP account to an inherited IRA.
I haven't found that 30-day issue to be an issue for most people. I mean, a surviving spouse is usually not ready to speak, much less sign paperwork in the 90 days. So for me, the real problem has been the non-spouse beneficiary, where we just don't get any choice to do any tax planning. So it is a reason. There's a handful of reasons that you can legitimately say an individual retirement account is better than the thrift savings plan. And one is, but they have to be important reasons for your client, right? So more investment choice, let's be honest. Some people are having they've got too many choices already, or there's not that much money in it, or they're going to be spending it pretty quickly. That wouldn't be a good reason to move it. That doesn't strike me as somebody that we really got to convince to move it to an IRA. Those targeted versus prorated withdrawals, we all know we can make the money last a lot longer if we spend from cash when the market's down instead of spending from the market when the market's down, right? But again, you've got to put this in perspective. Some people are never going to be in the market. You're going to meet people who have contributed a lot of money to thrift, but it's all in the G fund, and it's going to stay in the G fund. So we don't really have a reason to move that to an IRA for them as well. The QCDs, qualified charitable distributions, only allowed from IRAs, not from employer-sponsored plans. And some of people are never going to be doing qualified charitable distributions. They're going to be having a hard time making their own ends meet. And then being able to invest my Roth money differently from my traditional money, because I might be strategically spending it at different times. Can't do that in the thrift savings plan. And so there's probably another one in there, but you get the point. You already know what IRAs can do. There are a couple things that are a little clunky that I've pointed out about the thrift savings plan, but everybody doesn't need to move their money to an IRA. And if they are leaving it with the thrift savings plan, you have an obligation to point out that volatility issue and coach them into something that looks a little bit more like the L income fund if they're at least retirement age-ish, and a little unsophisticated about how violently market volatility can erode their values. If the market drops, just their luck as they're in their early retirement.
You want to keep going, or do you want to?
Yeah, well, what do you think? Are they fun questions? I only want the fun ones.
We've got a few about, like, do you recommend any online calculators or flow charts or technology tools that have more than like a pension calculator, but things like outcomes like reduction, retirement path, FEHB impacts that you would recommend?
Yeah, we haven't used them extensively just because we can usually do the calculation pretty quickly with a fair amount of, our clients come in prepared. Even if we're only going to talk to them for an hour, they come in pretty prepared, which is kind of what I wanted to talk about next. But Joanne might have an opinion on some of those. She does her own calculations as well. So we just haven't used them. I'm not casting aspersions, but I don't use them.
And then I guess maybe one more for now. Can you
Okay.
discuss how you approach conversations with people who have saved mostly in retirement funds and have less in taxable accounts to weather any income gaps? How do you help them with their decision making, especially under duress and with less time to change behavior?
Yeah. So I'm always telling people to let's just take a deep breath. I mean, when you're talking to anybody under duress, whether you're trying to coach them into leaving their tax advantaged but expensive to take withdrawals from accounts, or any other of these big decisions, that I always find it's important to start with, any decision we make here is going to make it better, not worse. Like we don't have a magic wand and we can't fix everything overnight. But the way we're going to come to a better decision is not just to look at this one thing here. We're going to back it up and we're going to put it like, I love that financial plans are like putting puzzles together, and wouldn't you know, they fit together often in more than one way. But if I just can step back and look at all the pieces you've got here, I can tell you which are the pieces that are most important to hold on to, and which ones, when we get the plan together, this is the stronger one for you. This one will stay together better. And it often includes everything from, we got to go make some more money, or we've got to change where we live. And if you connect with your client and can connect with them quickly, because you're here to help and you have years and years of expertise and education and training, they can slow down and hear you, right? They can't slow down and hear you if all they're seeing is, my paycheck just disappeared, or my paycheck just went from 100% down to 30% or 22%. Of course, I'm going to have to spend this money. Well, let's just take a breath and check our options. So I just got a couple slides. I can tell you I'll offer you my experience, and then you'll take your experience and mold this into something that you think you can do for clients in a pro bono or a low cost, otherwise unattainable kind of price for people. So what I've been able to do, pretty effective advising in an hour. I send them a form to fill out that includes a lot of what your data forms include, but make sure that they know, just do your best on it. Keep the appointment. If you really have blanks there, or you're having trouble with my format, just bring a recent statement for all of your debts or all of your assets, and we'll fill it out together. So, just personal data on family members, and they usually do immediate family. And then I always ask two questions. Can I assume everybody's healthy? And is there anybody else in the family or friend group who could impact some of our financial decisions? And I'm fishing around for the aging parent that didn't do much planning. And sometimes all I'm doing when I find that out is giving them the tools to put some firewalls up by reminding them, you becoming financially unstable because you're helping mom, right, isn't helping anybody. It's making the whole family tree less strong. And I find sometimes if you don't ask, can I assume everybody's healthy? They don't tell you, right? And that's kind of a big deal question, but it's an easy enough way to get a response. Income and expenses, you can either ask them to bring their most recent tax return, recent pay stub. But when it comes to the expenses, most people don't really look at their cash flow very much, right? They just don't. And that's where we may need to do a lot of work. And you might want to spend the bulk of your time really helping them identify, these are fixed expenses, these are discretionary expenses. And when it comes to a discretionary expense, if we're experiencing what is hopefully temporary but very real loss of income, right? We need to identify those, and you empower them to take control of that, and by letting them know everybody has to do this, right? We're all going to do it, and it's really helpful to do that, so that you'll now have a better sense. So I just ask them, what's on an average month? I don't ask them to fill out a whole cash flow. I just say, what are your average monthly expenses? And then if I think this whole cash flow thing is going to be a problem for them, then we give them a couple tools to fill out a more detailed kind of income and expense cash flow spreadsheet. All their other assets, the details on their liabilities. I just want to make sure you know that you're going to meet a lot of people who have a lot of debt. And if you haven't worked with that clientele, and you don't have, this is just not, you haven't had to do credit card counseling before, you want to up your game on that a little bit, or simply say, I need to refer you to another planner who has more tools that we can do on that. And it's not just our lowest paid. I have seen credit card debt with SES level. Those are the highest paid senior executive level. And it just, they make a lot of money and they spend a lot of money, and then it gets away from them. So there's no judging. We got to grab this and see what we can do. I asked them if they have estate planning documents. It's a yes or no. I don't need to read them all the time, but I often will ask, do you remember? And if they don't really remember what they said in their estate planning documents, that's when I say, you got to bring that, you got to look at that. And this is what I want it to say. And if it doesn't say that, we need to circle back with your attorney. And of course, obviously, if they don't have documents, you're going to tell them, don't die, don't get sick, get documents tomorrow, right? I asked them for what their basic insurance coverages are, but probably the most important thing that I asked them to bring to our meeting, because it's going to be a working session. This is not going to be, let's get to know each other. We're gonna work together. What are your goals and what are your questions? And some people don't know what a goal is, but everybody knows what a question is. And so sometimes they're a little, I might call it something else, but whatever they bring me, right, then we're just going to go through that, and I'll take 10 minutes. Let me understand what you've gathered, the way you understand it, and then we're going to dive right into your questions. And then you'll know you've got to take this question before that question, or, what you're not asking that I think is kind of important. I'm putting this on the list, right? I want to save a little bit of time for this topic. You didn't ask me about, but it's kind of important for you. If you are meeting those people who are shell-shocked and or overcome with exhausted emotions, it's your job, and you can do this to get them to calm down a little bit and be proactive. So we're having people call their credit card companies and just explain what's going on. We've had people get their credit card interest rate from double digit 20-some% down to 3. Every credit card company can do it differently, but don't ever forget, they don't want people to be late or default. So there might be a little leeway there. I'm definitely asking people to, if they're really worried about whether they're going to make their mortgage payment or not, before look for programs. We had that whole list during COVID of, if you write the letter, you can get a little bit of relief for a few months, and it's still considered a loan in good standing. And I didn't dig that out for one of these slides, but you can find, talk with your lenders and just make sure, don't let it get worse, right? One of the things that I might be trying to do if somebody was really going to be losing a lot of income well before they can afford to retire is trying to find out how much we have to make, right? We don't need to replace all of their income because we're not putting any money in Thrift Savings Plan, and we're going to make a commitment to cut out some of the discretionary spending. But what do we have to make? I had a young guy who got his dream job. He's right out of college, got hired by USAID, and sent home already. Getting married in October, and to an elementary elementary school art teacher. So there's not a lot of money on the other side of this partnership either. And so I asked him a lot of questions just about, okay, what's your rent or mortgage? His mom had actually helped him a lot. He's an only child, and his mom had helped him with a pretty good down payment to buy a little condo. And so that was really, he didn't need a car, depending on what his next job opportunities are, but he lived close to public transportation, could do the ride share and public transportation. And I said, all right, so we don't have a paycheck coming in, most likely, even though now, who knows, he might get rehired, according to what happened yesterday in the courts. So I said, you don't have any income coming in. And if this perfect ideal job of yours never comes back online for you, how much money do we have to make each month? And we, I was kind of back of the envelope coming up with a number, and he wasn't playing along at all. And I said, no, we really have to think about this because it could be months. I mean, you may get back to your best ever job in the whole world, but you may not. And in the meantime, it's not happening today. And we've got to pay these things. And he said, well, I don't want to work just anywhere. I want a job that's meaningful. I said a lot of things in the back of my brain, but what I had to say to him was, no, you really need a job. We got to work on this together because I've seen this before, and you can set yourself up for bankruptcy before you turn 30 if you don't have at least enough income coming in the door for your basic expenses. So let's brainstorm here. Well, what else could you do? Can you wait some tables? Can you do that? Right. Can you right? What can you do just to meet the fairly modest expenses that you have while you job search? And fortunately, his fiance was a little bit more practical and did not like to hear the word bankruptcy and encouraged. She was pretty confident the two of them could cover their basics, right? Cutting back, I've in the live classes I've done, webinars that I've done for employees in the last 2 weeks, it has come up pretty much every time. So if you were me, this is a variation on the question, would you stop putting money in the thrift savings plan, or would you be putting as much in as possible, right? Because I might not be able to ever contribute to it again. And as much as that's an earnest, fair question, it's impossible to answer until you get to these one-on-one kind of sessions with people, because it's going to depend on whether they're closer to retirement and we're going to get a pension when we separate from service, or who are we kidding? We are not only not going to be getting a pension, even if we did get one, we don't have that many years of creditable service. It's not going to be very much. So yikes, we need to be building some cash. I just I have to, I hate to see how this little blip, that unasked for blip in their careers, will haunt them for the rest of their lives if we have to stop putting that money into their retirement plan, but I can't justify for them going into debt. I do bring up rent your house and move back in with mom and dad, or sublet your apartment and move in with some friends. I've recommended just lots of cost cutting spending habits. A lot of people get into spending habits that really aren't serving them very well. So just encourage. I have seen people change their demeanor when I give them tools to take charge, and it change in a good way. Just another list of some other things we can do. Oh, Caitlin did find it. Consider a hardship letter if you can't pay your mortgage. I didn't think she found it. And yeah, stay away from the payday loans. And then the other thing that we know when people are vulnerable, they'll be preyed upon. So people are going to be, you lost your job with the federal government, you need to give me that thrift savings plan, and I'm going to, you're never going to have to worry about money again. And you know what's going to happen. They're going to get sold a bill of goods and not only be out of work, but whatever money they had been able to put away in the thrift savings plan, they're going to be, vulnerable for that. So, those bad apples are out there, and the sharks are circling. So, do what you can to help them be certainly more confident. So Tammy Flanagan and I are going to do she's a benefits specialist with tons of experience. She and I are going to do more of I'll interview her, she'll interview me kind of talk for federal government employees a week from today. Joanne is working with me today, and she's a little concerned about getting swamped. She's a one-person, brilliant show. And I think anybody you reach out to as a federal government benefits specialist is kind of that way. The National Institute of Transition Planning is kind of in that same, they're overwhelmed. I've done an awful lot of work. I do a lot of my webinars for them. So my best advice to you is don't take it personally. If somebody says, I'm so sorry, everybody's working very long days and trying to help as much as they can. But if you can be succinct with your question, if you can have gone either over the slides or to OPM to say, I just want to make sure I have just this question. Am I reading it right? Am I missing anything? And all of us are getting better and better at giving concise answers. I meant to give both Joanne and Brandon a little pep talk about giving focused, concise answers as best they can, because we're so used to being so thorough. And as you can tell, there's a lot of detail here, but people really just need to know that they're not making a big mistake. And if you get a hold of a benefit specialist that can give you a little bit of time, that they'll be willing to do that, but try not to take too much of their time. You can refer your clients to Tammy's company. Tammy works with another 3 or 4 really good benefit specialists, and for a reasonable fee. It's very affordable. They will give advice to somebody that you come along that really does have a big conundrum with which should they be paying back a deposit, or I don't think this is, I'm getting credit for all my service, or just whatever they've got going on. You could send clients to retirefederal.com and hopefully they're busy, but hopefully for the trickier ones, that would be my recommendation, that you use that firm. But look at Thrift Savings Plan website, the OPM website. Tons and tons and tons of resources there. So do what you can. But stay in your lane, right? If you don't know, it's okay to say, I don't know. And anything you do for people who are so stressed is really, really helpful. Don't lose sight of that. Just your basic financial planning, common sense. This is better than that. If these are the choices it's coming down to, is going to help them a lot. So with that, I think I made it through the slides we needed to get through. How about some questions?
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah.
What's the best way to get more education on credit card debt management?
So there was a company out there, the National Foundation of Credit Counselors, nfcc.gov, and that's where I got a lot of what I learned, and they've morphed a little bit, but they're a national company, and they've been very helpful to me over the years, and I've seen them do some good work with people who were pretty close to what I thought was a pretty we're going to bankruptcy next situation. They were pretty helpful there. I will say it's a little uneven depending on the advisor you get assigned sometimes, but there's a lot of information on their website and a lot of resources there.
Can you confirm that non-spouse beneficiaries will be paid out in a lump sum that's taxable? I'm confused about that.
Yeah, okay, so the non-spouse beneficiaries cannot continue to have accounts with the Thrift Savings Plan. So the minute the Thrift Savings Plan knows that the employee or spouse of the employee has died, they just pay it out. And I've seen it pay out in 30 days. of a death. And if it's coming out of traditional thrift, it's taxable. And if it's coming out of Roth thrift, it's not taxable. But either way, we've lost 10 years of tax strategizing on how and when to take those payments.
Does TSP allow loans post-employment or only
They
during?
don't. They do not. Just during, yeah, you can only take a loan while you're employed. So a lot of people were thinking, well, let me get this loan going right now because I might need some money. And I'm saying, why don't you just go across the street to your little local bank, savings and loan or credit union, and if you really think you're going to need some money, and sign up for a line of credit, if that would be better than taking a loan against thrift, and getting a little part-time job would be even better.
Any tips specifically for ATC?
What's ATC?
I'm not sure. I'll move to a different question. Or
Okay.
Alan Skillern can add it to the Q&A or the chat. How capable do you find thrift to be when dealing with trust or estate beneficiaries?
I haven't heard, we haven't had a problem. What the problem is where I have seen a little clumsiness is when people are trying to fill out the beneficiary form. It's now all online, and the attorney is insisting that we need to put this, looks like a paragraph, and the form just isn't taking it. But I've seen that with a lot of 401k plans. I don't think that's thrift specific. And I personally haven't had a client where we couldn't get it done. So you might have to get on that 1-800 number, or but for the most part, people have been able to change the beneficiary to a trust with the advice of their attorney, so that we get the wording right and it doesn't get taxable when it hits the trust and all of that.
Someone's looking for more information on Medicare Part B for federal employees. Is there like any good information that you would
So if
recommend?
you go to the NITP website that I've got on the screen right now, they have archived articles that Tammy Flanagan has written. I think she's written for them on Medicare Part B. You can, and the interplay with federal government. She also writes a lot of articles for Fed Exec. If you Google her and look for articles, that's a resource. And then I would also consider Katie Votava, Votova, and I think her website is something Dr. Katie, as an expert in Medicare and how it does and doesn't line up with federal government, the many different health plans you can choose from in the federal government.
Do you foresee changes to retirement calculations specifically for those who are told to move back to DC with a higher salary?
Well, I thought you were going to ask, do I see a difference in the, the 30 years, or right? But that used to be something that we would recommend to people, or that people would strategize on. Okay, if it's your highest 3 average salary, that's going to be the driver of your retirement benefit for the rest of your life, go out on a big note, right? Or if you separate from service now, don't take your retirement, don't take a withdrawal of your little tiny contribution to it, because who knows right? 10 years from now, you might want to come back to federal service. And if we can get 5 years down the road with that higher salary, we not only are we getting health insurance for life, it pulls up the whole 3-year average again. But there are some salary adjustments based on where you work, and people who live in the Washington, D.C. area get a little bit of a boost there. That does affect their retirement.
So someone's asking, he knows someone who's been in the federal government for 10 years and was previously in the Air Force. Is there a way to calculate or determine if it's worth it to buy back service credit for that time in the military?
Yeah, it often is, but that's a question that I would have to, get out a pencil and paper for. I don't know if Brandon or Joanne have already answered something like that, but what you just look at, if I pay it back, what's my benefit? And if I don't pay it back, what's my benefit? And oftentimes you can make up in a short period of time the amount you had to pay, and then for the rest of your life have this bigger benefit. So it often does make sense to get credit for that time. Do you want to answer that, Brandon?
Sure, I've got a little bit of experience there with some
Yeah, I thought so.
military service. I just want to add one quick little caveat. There's a
Yeah.
timing aspect here. So if they didn't repurchase that that credit early in their career, they can still do it, but there's going to be an interest rate charged based on the years of service since they started with the federal government. So it's worth looking into, and probably sooner than later, because it'll cost less to do it now versus waiting.
Great. Thank you.
There's a question about whether you're aware of any talk that the government employee pension system might be targeted for cuts.
I'm not hearing anything like that. But what I am hearing, and is worth mentioning, is that there's a little paranoia in some corners that every once in a while sees the light of day, and then a whole bunch of people get all worked up about it. And it's that I've got to move my thrift savings plan to an IRA because they're going to take my money. And that's not how that works, right? This is your money. You're totally vested in it. And wait a minute, if you've got money in the G fund, you've already given it to the federal government. That fund is basically a short-term government bond fund. So I would be very careful if you're talking to somebody who has wrapped themselves in paranoia about documenting your advice. If they want to move it to an IRA, they can move it to an IRA, but not because the federal government is stealing their money. And I got to move it today because it might not be there tomorrow. So just calm them down.
Someone asked early in the webinar, they know someone that was laid off from a nonprofit due to federal funds getting
Oh, yeah.
off. Like, are there any programs that she can take advantage of?
No, that's a problem. So I'm in the basement of the production building in their studio. And then the producer today is a great guy, but he's a contractor. And so right after I finished, he sat down, I said, "So are you worried?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm funded, they say, for the year, but just because the contract has been funded doesn't mean that they won't abolish his job anyway." And he really doesn't have there's no pension that he could take an MRA plus 10 and work something out there. And and he's one of these, he and his wife are adopting foster kids, kind of a great guy. So I tried to coach him into being proactive, and he's kind of a laid back guy. No, I said, if you need some help, I'm happy to look at this for you and see where we can squeeze a dollar. And it's going to be rough for more than just these federal government employees who are getting the news right now. The ripple effect is pretty profound.
And another question, so staffing, and we talked a little bit about this before the webinar started. So staffing and benefits departments, like if they're subject to DOGE, like who would be the go-to contact parties for the employees?
Well, so Joanne was mentioning that we just can't imagine how they're going to process all of this if the HR departments have already been gutted. So you do always want to start with your HR department, and even before this all really started, HR departments were pretty uneven agency to agency. Right here at Fish and Wildlife, they did such a great job of preparing people. So this is coming. It was just, this is what you need to think of. This is what we can do for you. I mean, just really compassionate, thoughtful information that was essential. But, the next agency down the road a little bit may not have that. So this, OPM tells us what the rules are, and the Human Resources Department is supposed to be there to help you get your estimates. But eventually, if they really want everybody off the rolls, they're going to be hiring contractors to process all of this.
And I think this is related. So, agency HR specialists are overwhelmed. I expect there will be an enormous backlog in processing retirements, not to mention actually being able to provide impacted employees with accurate benefit calculations.
Correct.
So not having these calculations within short decision time frames is a possibility. Any guidance on how we, the financial advisors can help?
Yep. So, my advice, and it's already come up for all of this, is to say, we're going to do the best we can to show you what your benefit should be. And we're going to assume that until you have a paycheck, that if you lose your paycheck, we need to rein in spending and look for other sources of income until this gets resolved for you. But we do have the names of lawyers who, and somebody has been wrongfully terminated, or their pension wasn't calculated correctly, who have had to rattle some cages in the past. They're going to be very busy. And quite frankly, we haven't seen nearly as many people lose their paycheck yet as you would think. It feels like there's a like the early indications of a tsunami are coming, but right now, because the courts are drawing the lines, it's nobody's not nearly as many as you would think. People have been processed through, so maybe some agency's going to figure it out how to. We're essential. HR is essential. And in a downsizing in the corporate world, HR stays and turns off the light. So it may be that as we get the details of these VERA, VSEP, agency by agencies, that HR will now be carved out more routinely than it has been protected in the past, or it's been people just leaving in the past.
Maybe one more question.
Okay.
If a full retirement eligible participant has submitted their retirement paperwork to retire effective March 31st and is now laid off or offered another early retirement payment offer, will they be eligible for any of these other offers or not, since they've already submitted their retirement?
I don't know. Joanne, do you want to answer that one? Did you even hear it?
I'm sorry, I was typing an answer. What was the question?
So it was, if somebody's already submitted their paperwork to retire as of the end of this month, and then these offers are coming out now, are they eligible for that, or did this ship sail for them because they already submitted their paperwork?
No, they would still be eligible for that. Under general rules, you can withdraw your retirement application up to date of separation. So if that
Okay.
offer is made, to the entire agency, they would be eligible for that VSIP.
That makes sense.
Yep.
See,
Uh,
great
so
question.
we're out of time,
know.
unfortunately. This was amazing. There's so much information. I feel so happy that we were able to do this
Yeah,
webinar.
me too.
Karen, you're amazing. There's so many questions. There's a lot of questions about the slide deck and the recording. We will be sending that out after the slide deck, probably tomorrow. The recording might take a little more time to get out to you, but if not tomorrow, early next week. I also wanted to remind you of the March 27th webinar with the audience of government employees that
Right.
Karen will be presenting along with a benefits specialist. And I put the link in the chat, but if you didn't see it, you can go onto the CFP Board's website on their events page, and you can register there or encourage any clients, friends, family members to register there as well to get this amazing information and resource. So
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody who turned out for this too. It was very gratifying to see so many people who want the information, and I'm hoping all of you sign up to do some pro bono work. Your skills are very needed and will be very much appreciated. So thanks.
thank you so much.
All right. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.